So officially, Polymarket is banned in the US. But look, I spoke with a former employee of the company who said that it was an open secret in the office that people could use VPNs to place bets. You go on their Discord, it's full of tips about how to evade the ban on American users. It's clear that people in the United States are using this platform.
Well, Casey, we've talked about how rich people are preparing for the election, but how about people who are trying to get rich by betting on the election?
Yeah, the average Joes out there, Kevin, just average internet users who are hoping to pass the time by making a little bit of sweet cash.
Yes. So today we're talking about betting markets for the election, and in particular...
I actually predicted you were going to want to talk about this.
Oh,
but go on.
I see what you did there. So we have talked about prediction markets on this show before. I went to a big prediction markets conference. We talked about it last year. These are these sort of markets where people can go on and bet on real world events, celebrity romances, things of that nature, but also more serious things like presidential elections. And I would say that one of the breakout stories of the 2024 U.S. presidential election has been the rise of these prediction markets for elections.
Yes, of course. Everyone in this country and many people around the world are obsessed, rightly so, with what is going to happen in the U.S. presidential election. And everyone is looking for someone who can just say to them definitively, here is what is going to happen. And while I don't know if these markets are doing that, they certainly are making some people feel that way.
Yeah, so this has sort of become one way that political followers are attempting to handicap the race, is literally by looking at the bets that people are making on these platforms. Elon Musk has been a big proponent of prediction markets, and in particular has been posting a lot of screenshots of Polymarket, which is one of the big prediction markets websites where a lot of this gambling is going on.
Oh, I thought that was a place where you could meet a throuple.
No, there are different apps for that.
Okay.
But I thought we should talk about this today because as people are getting ready for the election next week, as people are sort of trying to figure out who is going to win, I would say this is a place where a lot of election anxiety has gone to sort of sit in the days and weeks leading up to the election. I think they raise a lot of really interesting questions about how faithfully they are tracking the polls and the places where they are diverging.
Yeah, and while these markets have a lot of big fans and backers and boosters, there's also been some reporting recently that these platforms deserve scrutiny and that they might not be providing quite as accurate an assessment of either candidate's odds of winning as maybe you might imagine from just looking at the raw numbers.
Yeah, so as usual, when we are talking on this show about some sort of complicated financial scheme involving cryptocurrency and betting, we are going to talk today with our friend and colleague David Yaffe-Bellany of the New York Times. He and my colleague Aaron Griffith recently wrote about these election betting platforms and the sort of rise in popularity they are seeing during this election season.
It's a rare chance to talk to David about a crypto story before the person involved goes to prison.
Yes, let's bring him in. David Yaffe-Bellany, welcome back to Hard Fork.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's talk about betting markets, prediction markets, whatever you want to call them, and the election. I would say this has been one of the biggest changes in this election cycle, is that all of a sudden everyone is talking about these prediction markets. So can you just sort of help us understand how this happened?
Yeah, so it came out of nowhere, sort of. I mean, suddenly, at least from my perspective, everybody that I've followed on Twitter, every crypto person that I was interested in was tweeting out the odds on this website called Polymarket. And it seemed to show that, Trump had this massive lead over Kamala Harris. And, it's really kind of blown up and become sort of the way a lot of people on the internet are understanding the state of the race.
Yeah. And I did some research into betting markets and prediction markets last year when I was writing about Manifold, which we talked about on the show. And I was surprised to learn that around the world, betting on elections is legal and happens in a lot of countries, including the UK, where it's been legal for many years. But this has not been traditionally legal in the U.S., correct?
Yeah, and I mean, its legality is still the subject of a lot of dispute in the U.S. A small elections betting platform actually recently won a lawsuit against a government agency, allowing it for the time being to offer these betting markets, but that suit hasn't been totally resolved yet, and so there's still sort of a legal cloud over this type of betting.
And if you're new to the world of these prediction markets, why do people who follow them closely believe that they offer some sort of information that you can't find other places?
The argument is basically that markets aggregate a lot of information, that the people who are placing bets are doing so because they've digested the polls. They've thought about recent news stories. They've thought about historical context, and basically they've processed all that information and made a bet. And if you have enough people doing that and doing it in an intelligent way, then you end up with a prediction of the future that could be more reliable than any of those sort of individual metrics. That's the theory. I mean, whether these sorts of prediction markets actually have a better chance of forecasting the election than a traditional poll, that's not clear yet, and it's something that academics are still studying.
Yeah. So let's talk about Polymarket, because you recently wrote a story about this one particular prediction markets company. Tell us about Polymarket.
So Polymarket is a betting platform founded by a 26-year-old NYU dropout. It was founded back in 2020, so it's been around for a few years, and it has become the most popular of these betting markets. It's not the original one. You may have heard of Predict It, which was around for a long time, but it's become the sort of most used, most cited kind of elections betting market in this cycle. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is that unlike other betting markets, it does not cap the amount of money that you can gamble. So if you want to bet $30 million that Trump will win the election, you can do that on Polymarket. On Predict It, you're capped at $850. And also, I think it's just, sort of marketed itself successfully. It has a kind of charismatic young founder who's gone around about preaching the benefits of prediction markets. And so it's really, become a kind of internet phenomenon in this race, and it's been trumpeted by Elon Musk, by Trump himself, and a lot of people are paying attention to it.
And it's a crypto prediction market, right? I mean, it's the reason that you are covering it as the crypto reporter is because your bets are made in cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, you place bets in USDC, which is a stable coin. The identities of the people who are placing the bets are not exactly public, but you can see the sort of anonymous accounts that they're placing the bets from. So there's a level of transparency that's lacking on some of these other platforms, which allows outside groups to kind of examine betting patterns, and it's something that has excited a lot of people in the research community about it.
And how much money has been bet on the U.S. presidential election so far on Polymarket?
The figure as of a week ago for the outcome of the Electoral College contest was in the region of $100 million. It's probably gone up since then.
Do you have a sense of like how much of that is coming from Americans betting on the American presidential election, or how much of it is foreigners?
So officially, Polymarket is banned in the U.S. It was hit with a fine by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission a couple of years ago, and as part of that settlement, it agreed not to offer these products to people based in the U.S. But look, I spoke with a former employee of the company who said that it was an open secret in the office that people could use VPNs to place bets. If you look at the topics of some of the markets that the website offers, it's stuff that Americans are very interested in. You go on their Discord, it's full of tips about how to evade the ban on American users. It's clear that people in the United States are using this platform. How many of them, how much money comes from them, that's not totally clear, though.
Your story says that Polymarket told you that they use industry-leading compliance measures to prevent American customers from betting, and I think it's funny that those measures don't include stopping Americans from talking about how to evade those measures in their own Discord.
Well, to be fair to Polymarket, they also told us that they have hired some sort of company to clean up their Discord and go in and delete some of those posts, and yet a couple of days before the story came out, I was still able to find plenty of examples of people talking about it.
So right now, if I go onto polymarket.com, I see that their top election prediction market, who will win the presidential election, has Donald Trump ahead 66% to Kamala Harris, who has 34%. That is obviously a much wider spread than any of the sort of traditional polls that I've seen, at least. Why is it such a big spread?
Yeah, well, first of all, I saw Elon Musk tweeting this morning about how he wants it to get up to a 69% chance of a Trump victory, which is
the thing you have
really...
to hand it to him is he's so funny,
Yeah.
and he has all these fresh jokes all the time. I can't wait to see what he comes up with next, that rascal.
But yeah, this sort of divergence from the polls, which basically show that it's a dead heat between the two candidates, is one of the things that got me interested in Polymarket, and which has sort of catapulted it to a new level of attention in this election cycle. And the sort of dubious thing about what's going on is that Polymarket has now revealed that a series of large bets by a single person were at least partially responsible for swinging the odds so far in Trump's direction. We don't know exactly who that person is, but we know that they bet somewhere in the region of $30 million on a Trump victory, and that they're French and that they have a trading background. And this also sort of raised the specter of, could this be some sort of effort to manipulate the market? Polymarket has come out and said, no, this is someone who just really believes that Trump is going to win and is making a bet based on that.
So help me understand this, because the sort of thing that you will hear and that I heard when I was reporting on prediction markets is that these kind of sort of this kind of market manipulation of prediction markets is hard to do, because essentially, if you do think that these odds on Polymarket are out of whack, couldn't you just make money betting on the other side?
Yeah, and that's part of what the company and its backers have said in response, that if these odds were really so skewed, then you would see people placing Harris bets and, you would reach some kind of equilibrium. And they might be right, or it just could be that, like, Polymarket doesn't have a large enough user base, or like a rational enough user base, or, there are issues structurally that are preventing that sort of equalizing effect from happening. And we just don't know yet. I mean, if Trump wins the election in a huge landslide, I think a lot of people will point to Polymarket and say they were kind of ahead of the curve on this. And it's also possible that this French guy has some bit of information about what's going to happen that we don't have, that he knows about the October surprise about Kamala Harris that's coming down the pike. That's sort of how people theorize prediction markets should work, and what should make them good forecasting mechanisms.
Well, I would find that very disturbing. Ever since the Louisiana Purchase, I've said to France, you stay out of our politics. And so for them to get involved in this way, I find really, really disturbing. Also, how many French people even have $30 million? It's what, Catherine Deneuve? And then now I'm out of people. So that seems strange to me. But no, to the point you're making, Dave, it's like, let's think about it. It's like, okay, so the people that are betting on Polymarket are, let's face it, probably mostly Americans who have figured out a way to use a VPN to make a bet. And I just believe that the group that sort of self-selects there, they actually just want to influence the election by creating the appearance that Donald Trump is running away with the game. So I find it very hard to believe that what we're seeing on Polymarket is a more accurate representation of the race than the actual polls that are being done across the country by, experienced pollsters.
I guess one thing that's been striking to me about Polymarket odds is that until recently, the odds were basically the same as the polls. I mean, they showed that it was an incredibly close race with about a 50-50 chance on each side. And so at that point, you sort of wonder, like, well, what new information are we actually getting from this that we don't get from traditional sources? And then at the point where there's a big swing, we discover that that's because one guy in France bet a ton of money. And again, it raises some questions, and, we'll see what happens on November 5th. But I think, the concerns Casey's raising are totally valid.
I think this is a real concern, because we know that the perception of elections in the days and weeks leading up to those elections matters for things like donations and volunteer support and just general turnout. But I also think there's another way in which it may matter, which is that it is now setting up the expectation that there is going to be this lopsided Trump victory, at least among the people who believe in prediction markets. And so if the race is not called right away, or if it is close, or if Kamala Harris is deemed the victor, I think that does lay the groundwork for some nefarious attempts to sort of deny the results of the election.
Absolutely. Again, and I've said this a few times over the past couple of weeks, but I just think it's important to keep pointing out to people there is an effort underway to delegitimize the results of the election. And one of the things that you're going to see in the aftermath of the election, should Harris appear to be winning, is people pointing to Polymarket and any other thing they can that made it seem like Trump was going to win and say, she can't possibly have won. Look at what Polymarket was telling us, right?
Yeah, and this is something, people are always looking for something to blame after their side loses an election. And I think Polymarket could be blamed by whichever side loses the election.
There are some other exciting betting markets on Polymarket, including, whether Taylor Swift will get engaged this year. There was a market on who the HBO documentary would identify as the person behind Satoshi Nakamoto. We could probably spin up some hard fork markets.
We have hard fork markets on Manifold, but we always forget to resolve them. So now people are just mad at us.
Well, on that point, though, David, are there notable cases where a Polymarket prediction market told us something surprising?
So the example that Polymarket has sort of promoted as, a time that the service proved its value was that as soon as the first presidential debate over the summer happened, the odds of Biden dropping out, swung kind of heavily in that direction. But of course, at the same time, every pundit in the universe was talking about how that was, potentially on the cards. I think it's true that maybe Polymarket sort of anticipated that really was going to happen a bit earlier than like the public discourse did, but it was still directionally kind of the same.
Yeah, and that is a case where I'm perfectly willing to believe that these prediction markets might help you get a sort of, it might help you learn something 5% faster than if you were not paying attention to it. But in most cases, that 5% advantage doesn't really matter. It's kind of boring. And unless you're some sort of like financial analyst, I don't think it matters that much in your life.
Part of what's also happening here, it's about the sort of financialization of everything. Why can't we bet on every little thing that happens? Let sort of markets sort of dictate our behavior in even more spheres of life than they already do. And to people who are big supporters of crypto, that's a utopian vision of the future, but not everyone feels that way.
Yeah. All right. One other thing we should talk about with respect to Polymarket is this issue and this concern of wash trading. Some crypto research firms have recently looked into this, and according to Fortune, which published an article on this week, a significant amount of the trading volume on Polymarket's presidential betting market consists of potential wash trading. So, David, what is wash trading and why is it happening on Polymarket?
So wash trading is when, trades happen back and forth that are essentially artificial. It's sort of an effort to create the illusion of trading activity. And that can be helpful, to a platform because it makes the platform seem more popular. It can be helpful to the people sort of facilitating the wash trading if, they're going to get some sort of benefit from it. So, in the crypto world, sometimes if you're like a really active user on a platform, if that platform creates a token later on, you might get like preference, as you try to accumulate a supply of that token. So we've reported that Polymarket has explored the possibility of launching a token. Others have reported that as well. And so, the company doesn't really make any money right now. And so it's looking for ways to generate revenue. That's a plausible path.
I was surprised by that. Why don't they just charge a small fee on these transactions?
I think partly it has to do with the legal gray area around this sort of thing. At the point where you not only have traders who are using VPNs to get around the geo-blocking and trade from the US, but you're also profiting from that activity, then you're potentially in more legal hot water.
Yeah, so the platform is not taking a cut of every bet made on the platform the way that like a sports book at a casino would. But they are benefiting from a lot of hype and discussion around the platform as potentially an important signal of who's going to win the election.
And they're about to raise another $50 million from VCs, and, they're burning through that sort of startup capital the way that lots of tech companies do, and sort of figuring that eventually, some point down the line, they'll figure out a way to make money.
Have they considered selling a T-shirt that just says polyamorous on it?
Shane Copeland, the CEO, has made jokes about the fact that he should have started a sex podcast instead of a betting website. So
he has the URL.
Yeah, maybe you guys should get together with him and
we would love to. Shane, call us.
What do we know about the politics of Polymarket itself?
The politics, if you will.
Because they have taken money from Peter Thiel's founder fund, was an investor in theirs. People on the left have used that to say that maybe they are sort of secretly in cahoots with the Republicans. Did you find anything in your reporting about the politics of Polymarket, the company?
So we reported, like everybody else has, that one of Thiel's firms is backing Polymarket. Shane did not speak with us for the story, but after it came out, he posted a long tweet about the story in which he said, there's nothing to this. The partner at Founders Fund who backed us, wasn't, just a different person than Thiel, and that, this is a ridiculous claim about the platform. He was photographed, though, at the RNC, like socializing with Donald Trump Jr., and that photo, I think, got a lot of traction for a while, but he's since also been photographed, with his arm over Tim Waltz's shoulder at some fundraiser. So, to me, it looks more like a guy who just is really good at networking and, enjoys being around famous and powerful people and, trying to kind of use their star power to promote his venture more than it does like some sort of right-wing conspiracy.
Well, I'll tell you what I told Kevin, which is that if Kamala Harris wins, this will be the last segment we're doing on prediction markets on the show, because we've done 2 of them now, and I'm still not convinced that they're telling us anything we couldn't already find out from other memes.
Well, I think they do reflect this sincere belief among at least a lot of tech people that you can get better information by making a market around it, right? That people will have better research behind their views if they have money behind those views, and that if you want to look at the way things are going in the world and find out what's happening in the world, you shouldn't look at what people say. You should look at what they bet on.
I think that is true in the case of the stock market, where you have some of the smartest people in the world and vast sums of money who are trying to absolutely maximize their returns. I think it is less true on these rinky-dink platforms with a group of self-selected nerds who are betting relatively small sums of money on relatively few events. That I don't actually think you can get that much information from.
No, I think that's fair. And I also think we know that markets can be distorted and manipulated and also just full of bad information, right? People don't, people who bet on sports are not always betting on who they think is going to win the game, right? Maybe they're betting on their favorite team or their favorite.
Are you saying you've met sports gamblers who aren't totally rational actors?
Yes, people are not rational actors in these markets. People are not even rational actors in the stock market, right? Look at GameStop. That was a case in which, a bunch of people decided to sort of behave irrationally together and push the price of the stock up. So, when people sort of have this absolute faith in the power of prediction markets, I just look around and I don't see a lot of markets that look extremely rational to me.
No, but what I do see, Kevin, is Americans becoming degenerate gamblers. And I do think that is a piece of this story as well. I read a piece in The Lancet this week. It is a journal of public health, and it had a paper projecting that consumers globally will lose around $700 billion on gambling losses by 2028. So I think prediction markets will probably be a pretty small part of that relative to sports gambling, for example. But I do think we should take note of just how many different aspects of American life gambling is creeping into, because as always with gambling, it is usually the house that wins and not the consumer.
Well, in this case, it sounds like Polymarket is not even, the house is not even really making any money.
Yeah, let's just say I've seen smarter houses out there.
Yeah.
Well, David, I predict your time here has come to an end with 100% certainty.
Yeah, I'll take the other side of that. I want to have him on for another half hour.
No, I didn't mean he could never come back. I just meant for this segment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to place a bet that I'm staying on for a couple more seconds.
Nope,
I think
you
I
lost.
win.
0%.
Hey! All right, Dave Yaffe-Bellany, thank you, as always, for coming on.
Thanks so much.
Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.